Today's voiceover talent is more than just a pretty voice. Today's voiceover talent has to be a boss, a VO boss. Set yourself up with business owner strategies and success with your host, Anne Ganguzza, along with some of the strongest voices in our industry. Rock your business like a boss, a VO boss.
Welcome, everybody, to the B.O.S.S podcast. I'm your host, Anne Ganguzza, along with my lovely co-host, Gabby Nistico. Hey, Gabby.
Hello.
So, Gabby, today we're going to talk about pay-to-play. So there's a lot going on in the industry, of course. We spoke about that in one of our other podcasts. But pay-to-plays have been an integral part of voiceover for about 10 years?
At least
10 years.
Yeah.
And they have evolved along with the digital technology, I would say. And I used them personally when I first started off. And I do have a couple of sites that I'm still a member of. Gabby, what about you?
I do. I have one pay-to-play that I'm actively involved in, Voice123.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I've referred to pay-to-plays a couple of different ways. I've called them the pay-to-plague occasionally because sometimes it feels that way. It's a little bit of a plague. And I've also, many times over the years, called them a necessary evil because in some ways they're good and in some ways they're not so good. So I think that's some of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how they were good first. How's that? Because I know everybody else is talking about how bad they are right now. So
I know. You and your positivity. Blah, blah, blah. Okay.
I'm going to start off by saying that they are the wave of the digital world. And it was just it's an evolution of technology. And it's not just voiceover. I mean, it's every industry that's out there that has some form of online presence. And I think personally that is a good thing. And I think if you play with it right and you, you have a strategy behind it, I think that it's a really smart thing. 10 years ago, when I started in the industry, the pay-to-plays were a little bit different. They were not as full of people.
Yeah,
they were not as
weren't
populated.
As saturated. Yeah,
they weren't as saturated, and their capabilities were not quite what they are today. Voice123 I've been on since I think the beginning of my career, because if somebody hired me off of Voice123, that there was no middleman. There still is no middleman today that I know of, and they essentially allowed me to deal with the client and be transparent about rates, be transparent about how they could get in touch with me, and they never had to use Voice123 again, and that was a tremendous advantage for me in the beginning to get a client base.
Probably about, I say it's got to be at least 12 years ago now. It might be even longer. I sat down with Alex Torrenega, the owner of Voice123, and his wife, and had a very long discussion about their vision and why they started the site and what they were trying to do. And really, they were and still are just acting as a meeting place. They're trying to bring two sets of people together for the purpose of conducting business, and it makes sense to me. No, I don't always agree with the rates that they post and some of the things that they suggest. However, I think if a talent is well educated, knows how to advantageously use pay-to-play sites, and already has a well-rounded studio and established beginnings to their business, a solid demo, all of the things that they should have, training, then yes, it is definitely one of the multitude of ways in which you can find more work. And I'm all for that.
Yeah, very important that you said it. It is one avenue, not all of the places that you should be getting your work opportunities, because in any industry, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to depend on that one client because they may not be there tomorrow. As a business owner, you shouldn't necessarily depend on one source for all of your evolving work opportunities. I'm actually a member of both Voice123 and Fidalgo. Fidalgo has kind of grown over the past few years to incorporate more work in the U.S. The owner of Fidalgo has become somewhat of a kind of a cultural hero, I should say, to some people, because he has fought for the rights of voice talent and for the rights of fair rates by limiting his range of acceptable rates. He actually will approve the jobs, and I guess he also approves the rates that they come in at.
I would actually like for you to elaborate a little bit on Fidalgo because I don't know it very well.
Well, I've been part of Fidalgo probably for the past year. Armin, who is the owner, became more interested in getting work for United States people, and so he started to expand his reach and his search to incorporate those jobs. The overall job opportunities that are available for us are not quite as extensive as they are for Voice 123. But the one thing that Armin did, he was the first person to incorporate that rate structure where he would not accept jobs that were less than a certain amount of money, and he would, I guess, make his clients have set to a certain rate standard. Otherwise, the job wouldn't be posted, which is really great. There is no middleman. You pretty much audition for the jobs that are there, and then you communicate with the client from that point on. There is no managed jobs that I'm aware of on Fidalgo.
Is there any penalty for how often you submit, how much you submit, how many auditions you answer?
Right now, no. There's no, well, there's no mention, and I certainly haven't seen it. And there are times on days I'll just go and submit for every available job, you know. But again, the available jobs per day vary for U.S. talent. As opposed to Voice 123, you know, I might get anywhere from 10 to 20 opportunities. And jobs that I can, and that also depends on what I've specced out in my profile, what I want to see. Jobs that, and on Voice 123, I'm not seeing any jobs that are $100 and less. So
right,
or free, or you know,
right.
So I get more opportunities for Voice 123, but Fidalgo, you know, is coming along.
Interestingly enough, and I don't know how many of our listeners know this, really none of the pay-to-play websites, none of the leading pay-to-plays are domestic. None. Now, Voice 123, I say, is quasi-domestic because even though they are a U.S.-based company, they kind of aren't. Their owners are actually Colombian.
Right.
And most of their base of operations and most of their staff is located in South America.
And they also have a spin-off company.
Yes,
which is still
they do.
in
They
existence, called Voice Bunny.
Voice Bunny is frowned upon because it advertises the lowest of the low rates.
Right.
And even though they claim that, yes, you can set your minimums and you can effectively do whatever you want, the problem is the clients that are using a service like Voice Bunny really aren't looking for fair market rates. They're looking for those low bottom feederish type of things. Voices.com, for all the controversy. I don't want to get into all that, guys. We talked about it last week. We talked about it in our last episode. You can always reference that one if you'd like to and get an understanding of what in the world is happening right now in our industry with them. Let's instead just talk about the basics, the pros and the cons, if you will, of just their service on a very base level. The pro, from what I can see with Voices, and ironically, the actual reason I personally don't use Voices is because their origin and their stronghold in most of their casting and their job types is corporate industrial, which is not a big area for me. Never has been.
Right.
And so from a corporate industrial standpoint, the folks who do a lot of corporate narration and that sort of thing seem to do really well with them. Because people don't even remember this. You know, way back when, 10, 15 years ago, they were called Interactive Voices. They were a completely different company.
I remember. And you know what? Voice 123 was always leading. And in terms of subscribers, Voices was always kind of second in line. And I think that's where they started to split off and offer these things, which people are finding very controversial, like escrow and managed jobs, which still they are the only pay-to-play to do that.
It started off as what on the surface appeared to be solutions to some of the problems that people really didn't like about pay-to-plays. And then we found out the underbelly was not so pretty.
Right. Or they were being abused.
Right. And so you guys can do your research, get online. If you haven't yet been to it, the website that I have, my little pet project called Say No to Cheap VO.
Yeah.
We've done some pretty extensive coverage of what's going on with this. Take a peeky.
And I'm just going to say, though, in the beginning, when escrow, because escrow came before managed jobs. Just a little bit of history, guys.
Yeah.
Escrow on that site was relevant, and it was a choice-driven thing where you could choose to have the payment be paid to Voices first, and it would be kept in escrow until the job was finished, and then the monies would be released to you. And it wasn't a big deal at the time. And I'm going to say this because I myself had experience with Freelancer, and it used to be called Elance, which I think is now Odesk. And those are the freelancer websites that you always had people paying money to the company, and they would hold it in escrow, and then you would get paid.
But it was reasonable.
It was reasonable. It was never a big, and you could always incorporate that escrow, in your quote. Voices, ultimately, it became a requirement. And that's when people started kind of saying, hey, what's up with that? We were never forced to do this before. And then managed jobs came on the scene, and then that's a whole nother issue.
For many, many years now, I've compared pay-to-plays to dating websites. This whole dating website concept, for those of you who don't know that much about Voices, the easiest way I can explain this is that their involvement has gone past, hey, here's person A, here's person B, we're going to help them meet, facilitate that meeting online, and then you guys can take it upon yourselves to go get together and go on a date and get coffee. Voices has now basically gone, okay, so we're going to facilitate your meeting online, but then we're going to go ahead and escort you to the restaurant, and
what a great analogy.
We're going to police your date.
That's a great analogy.
And then at the end of the night, you can't exchange phone numbers. You have to give it to us so we can give it to the other person. So they're like a chaperone. It's very weird.
They're a chaperone on your date. I love that. That's a perfect analogy, Gabby.
And let me ask you something. Do you believe that pay-to-play websites are for beginners?
Well, I'm going to say that it's a source of job opportunities. When you're first starting out, it's very difficult to understand how to market yourself, how to actually acquire clients without having a casting website. Get a great website that describes who you are, what your business does, and get yourself found that way to really start off. And I think most people, when they get into voiceover, they are not at that level yet. Their last thought is to get their website done and SEO strong. And that's where I think that most beginners or people that are new to the industry tend to stay in the pay-to-plays. And then when they don't get anywhere, they're, what happened? I don't get it. This is not working for me. Put your head down, nose to the grindstone, and forage forward with other avenues like agents, like SEO, like getting a good website, like networking, doing your own searching, doing your own maybe cold calling, or whatever form of connection that you want to make with your target client.
See, I'll be very bold and just flat out say it. I don't believe pay-to-plays are for beginners at all. I have a lot of issue with the sheer volume of coaches that promote pay-to-plays as this, entry-level way in for beginners. I feel like that right there is part of the problem and why pay-to-plays are so flooded with
people,
inexperienced, talent who either don't have the chops yet, don't have the proper tools, don't have a proper studio, and they literally just flood the market with mediocre work. So I tell my students,
saying that newbies end up there because they're being pushed by coaches.
But exactly.
Absolutely. And they're not ready.
I tell my students, no, they're not ready. I tell my students, no, you're not ready for a pay-to-play until you are ready to go out and start cultivating your own business as well.
Well, that's
then you can join a pay-to-play.
That's an excellent
point.
So
I agree with you on that.
That's a great point, because pay-to-plays now, there's so much competition on the pay-to-plays that in order for you to actually, get a gig, I think you're going to have to be at the top of your game. It's going to be at the top of, and especially nowadays, it's going to be at the top of not only your vocal performance game, but it's going to be at the top of your audio quality game.
I think you are absolutely on the money, 100%. Going back to something you said earlier, though, about quantity and the amount of time you devote to pay-to-plays every day. I check it daily. I look at my incoming auditions, get the email alerts. Dear God, guys, don't do the email alerts.
I just filter them in another folder.
They're painful if you have them auto set up or going to your phone. I mean, you will lose your mind because there's so many of them. Don't do that. I might answer 1 or 2 auditions. I might answer none. I'm extremely selective about it. I really have to see something that looks amazing for me to go after. There are huge numbers of talent that's all they do.
Oh my God, I can't
all day
imagine,
long.
Gabby. I'm sorry.
I can't either. I
can't.
occasionally hear folks talk about like doing hundreds of auditions a day off of pay to play. There's no way I could do that.
If it works for you, that's great. But I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I'd much rather be found on the internet and have an inquiry come in, an email saying, hey, I heard you, I heard your demo. I really liked what you did. And can you give me a quote? That just bypassed the entire process of me having to audition and then just sit there and wait to see if I got selected. So I think that my time is better and more efficiently used if I focus on being found on the internet rather than auditioning. And that's all I do is audition, edit, audition, edit, audition, edit. No, I'm out there answering emails and providing quotes for people who already have heard my voice. They already know that they want to hire me, and they're just, all we're doing is negotiating the rate. So for me, it's a whole lot more efficient.
Probably the biggest benefit, the biggest realistic benefit, I should word it that way, that comes from working with a pay to play is when you have a client that finds you on pay to play, you immediately move the relationship off of the pay to play.
Yes, absolutely.
And it becomes a recurring long-term account. I have 2 wonderful clients that I have worked with now for years and years and years and years and years that came off of pay to play who contact me directly. It's actually been so long, in fact, that I sometimes forget that the job originated through Voice 123.
Again, those people that might be in there and auditioning, it works for a certain percentage of people, I know. I would much rather cultivate relationships. And if you listen to Gabby, if you listen to our podcast on outsourcing, I actually outsource somebody to go out and do research for me and contact people, so directly. So my money is better spent paying somebody to do that than it is necessarily spending all day in my studio and not having any time to actually communicate with these clients that I am starting to develop a relationship with, which I want to say is the most important thing.
And I, in kind, will give you my best piece of advice when it comes to pay-to-play websites. And I think it can all be summed up, ironically, a topic we discussed in our recent webisode, but you can learn about it on B.O.S.S. It's all about your emotional tolerance. If you are someone who cannot handle rejection well, and months or even a year of auditioning and pounding the pavement of pay-to-play, but not seeing any results, has the potential to really beat you down and make you second guess yourself and just become kind of an emotional wreck, don't do it. At least not yet. Because Anne and I both, we've seen this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Talent gets so frustrated.
So wrapped up.
And so emotionally invested. And it's part of the head game. And so we
really
talk
is.
about that head game inside of our webisode on emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
And it can help you. It can help you to navigate that field and better understand what needs to happen there. So definitely go check that out.
I want to say the number one thing that really discourages new people to the industry is that head game, and the fact that, let's say they're on a pay-to-play, they got rated, 2 stars instead of 4, and what was happening, and then they got no feedback, and it literally is such a head game that, and I know every single one of us, I believe, is affected by it. It's almost like a do or die situation. Like, are you going to actually stay in the voiceover industry, or are you just going to get frustrated and feel rejected all the time? And I'm going to just say there are days, and that's another podcast that we did, was the ups and downs of voiceover. It happens to all of us, and the better that you can control that emotionally, the better off your business is going to be, the more successful you're going to be. So for sure, take a look at our emotional intelligence webisode, because we have some definite tips and tricks to help you to overcome that. I think this was a very successful episode, my friend. It was awesome. I love talking about business with you, Gabby. I do too. That's why we have the B.O.S.S podcast. Business besties? Business boss BFFs. There we go. Oh, I love that. You guys, thank you so much for listening this week, and I just want to give a big shout out for our amazing connection to our sponsor, IPDTL. You too can record like a boss And you can check them out at ipdtl.com.
From all of us at the V.O.S.S podcast, have a kick butt week, stay focused, and rock your business like a boss.
A VO Boss. And you can like us on Facebook at VO Boss Podcast and Twitter at VO_boss.
Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and make sure to visit us on voiceover.com for our webisodes, exclusive content, and offers.
Thanks so much, guys. See you next week.
Bye.
Join us next week for another edition of V.O.S.S. with your hosts, Anne Ganguzza and Gabby Nisterko. All rights reserved. Anne Ganguzza voice talent in association with 3 Moon Media. Redistribution with permission. Coast-to-coast connectivity via IPDTL.